Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. It is great to be gathered here on the 11th of December for our final town hall of the year. Thank you, everybody, for joining us wherever you are in the world, whether that's in Pakistan or Brazil or Ireland or South Bend, Indiana. We are glad that we are gathered together during this holiday season. As people will recall, we have instituted within the town hall format the opportunity to have fireside chats. We were talking as we were preparing that we should probably, if we're going to advertise it as a fireside chat, have a backdrop of fire for myself and who my conversation partner is. Today, it is Mary Gallagher, the Maryland Keough Dean and Professor of Global Affairs at the Keough School. Mary, we are really glad to have you and thank you for the Northern Lights backdrop.
Thank you. Thanks, Michael. I'm in Boston, Massachusetts, so not that close to the Northern Lights, but at least it's somewhat fire related, I feel like.
That's right. I feel like we're in the genre of where we need to be, especially at this point for winter in the Northern Hemisphere. For those of you in the Southern Hemisphere, we're envious of your warmth and sunshine. As is the case in other town halls, Mary and I will talk for about a half hour and just have a free ranging conversation and see where it takes us. And then we have some additional programming from Jonathan and his team, which we'll move to in the second half of our hour. Mary, many of our team across the world have not had the chance to meet you yet. So I thought it might be best to start with a softball question about could you tell us a little bit about your background story and then your Notre Dame story and how you came here?
Sure, thanks. Yeah, I'm happy if people want to interrupt me or ask a question. I'm happy to do that too. So,
Perfect.
yeah, my name is Mary Gallagher. I arrived at Notre Dame this past July. I am a political scientist. I came from the University of Michigan, where I had spent the last 24 years. And prior to that, I got my PhD in politics at Princeton University and my bachelor's in government and East Asian studies at Smith College in Northampton, Massachusetts. I'm originally from Bethel, Connecticut, which is a small town near the New York border. Oldest of five kids. Probably from my name, you can tell I'm Irish American. And one of the things about coming to Notre Dame is that if you're born in the U.S. as an Irish Catholic, big, huge family, Notre Dame, even if nobody went to Notre Dame, like everybody's a Notre Dame fan. So I always like had this kind of knowledge of Notre Dame. And I arrived here sort of indirectly in the sense that, I was living in the Midwest. I certainly knew people, there's lots of people at the Keough School and at Notre Dame who work on Asia like I do. But I was asked to do the external review of the Liu Institute last year, and that's what brought me to campus. And that's where I sort of realized that a lot of what Notre Dame was doing around things international was very well put together, well organized, not just organized in a kind of structural sense, but also I think in an intellectual sense. Now, of course, now that I'm here, I could quibble with some of like, okay, so some of the organization might not be as clear as I thought it was, but um, I was really impressed, and I was impressed in particular with the way in which the university had um, articulated its strategic framework, its kind of vision for the future around being the, preeminent global Catholic research university at a time when I think a lot of universities are really struggling to define their vision, define where they want to be, beyond things that are kind of fashionable to discuss like AI or computer science. And not that those things are bad or unimportant, but just that I just thought it was a much more cohesive intellectual agenda. And I really was impressed with how important the global was to that ambition.
I appreciate everything you're saying. I think as somebody who also came from another institution, um, that sense when you start to learn about what Notre Dame wants to do and what it aspires to do in a global context and how it has tried to create things like the Keough School and Notre Dame Global to serve that need and to fulfill those ambitions and aspirations. It's an attractive proposition when you're outside of that looking in for sure. I want to go back to your time at Smith. I think in part because, like you, I'm also the product of a small liberal arts college. What did that education afford you, and when did you first know you wanted to focus on East Asian studies and China in particular?
Yeah, I was one of these high school and even middle school students that was just super excited to study a foreign country and to study a foreign language. And so I started with French back in middle school. Small public school in Connecticut, nothing fancy. And went to France and England for the first time, I think, in an eighth grade trip, one of those trips with your language class. Which I still remember funny things like our Spanish bus driver stole our bus and we didn't have a bus for a couple of days. Um, the so when I arrived at college, I'd spent some time in France. I had done 4 years of high school French. I'd spent a summer in France. And so I was at the level where I was speaking and reading at an advanced level. Too bad that I didn't keep it. But I got suddenly really not bored exactly, not bored with French, but just thinking, oh my God, I could go anywhere. Why am I limiting myself to Europe? And I happened to take a class in political science, which was my major, on Marxism, and it was taught by a China expert who's still a mentor to me today. And that was my freshman year. Freshman year, I changed from French to Chinese over the summer and then got ready to go to China for my junior year abroad, which happened to also coincide with 1989 and the student movement. So the first time I went to China was in the fall of 89. I was in Hong Kong for the summer. And, China was still under martial law when I first got there. So there's lots of interesting things about that whole experience, and it resonates with me when Father Bob talks about his experience going to Kenya for the first time as a seminarian, and being really homesick, and being in a place that's completely foreign to you. I was also at a place that had just undergone this terrible traumatic event. But how impactful it was to have that experience, and how important it is for students to be able to have study abroad experiences that challenge them. And the other thing is, of course, and Michael, I'm sure you might have to deal with this quite a lot, particularly in these days. Like my parents let me go to China. They were just, oh yes, there's been this major violent act in the capital, but please go and have study abroad. You know,
It's so funny you say that because I was going to ask you how your parents felt about sending you after that event. I mean, it's a testament to them and to you that you went ahead and did it, right?
yeah, my parents were not, let's say, helicopter parents.
Nor were mine. When I was studying abroad in Italy, I called them once a month from the general post office where I had to stand on line in downtown Florence, and I waited to give the telephone operator the money to then go into the booth, and I had just enough money for a 5-minute call, and they knew that's all I could do. So it is a very far cry from what some of the parents we deal with today for sure.
Yes,
Did
parents and children, because my daughter also did Chinese when she was at Michigan, went to Taiwan for the summer. This was 2019, so right before the pandemic. And she arrived, she's jet lagged and she's, can't find for some reason can't find the dorm. And she calls me on her iPhone, and then I give her directions by seeing where she is in Taipei and like, okay, you should turn right now. And I was like, this is
too
not good.
much?
This is not good. You speak Chinese. You should be asking somebody on the street how to get there.
What were you, did you get to the chance to go visit her while she was in Taipei?
I did not. I did not, unfortunately.
Um, you have talked a couple times about coming here from Michigan. Can you tell people a little bit about your work there and what lessons you brought from the leadership positions that you had there to Notre Dame?
Yeah, so I was hired as a, as an assistant professor in political science. I spent, the first whatever, 8 years getting tenure and working on my research. After I was tenured, I was asked to direct the Center for Chinese Studies at a time where it was going through kind of a leadership transition, and also it ended up that I was also then working with an alum and a donor to endow the center. So I ended up staying there from 2008 until 2020, a pretty long time. Kind of an unusual. Usually you would step down after 10 years, but because we got this endowment halfway through, I stayed to sort of implement a lot of new programs around Chinese studies. Um, but no good deed goes unpunished. So as soon as I stepped down, the dean asked me to then take over the entire institute. So that's all the area studies programs and institutes, as well as the thematic programs in human rights and democracy and things like that. So 17 centers and programs, not a school like Kyo, but similar in many ways, similar in the sense that it was an amalgamation of pre-existing institutes and centers with bigger endowments than the institute and longer legacies and histories, as well as, people feeling, definitely some of the faculty feeling that the International Institute was just a bureaucratic umbrella placed on top of them to, bother them and regulate them in ways that they didn't like. Um, but I was part of the mandate was to make the institute really function as a what we called one II, to function as an institution that coordinated, brought people together, offered professional development opportunities for staff in such a way that it wasn't just like you're in this tiny little unit with maybe 3 or 4 people, but you're in this larger entity that can offer you a lot of other opportunities. Also having big degree programs like an undergraduate degree in international studies, a similar program to what we have at Keough in the MGA, the Masters of Global Affairs, and then not joint PhD programs, but bringing a lot of the PhD students from the humanities and the social sciences to the II for things like area studies or language or and a big part of the job was also administering the Title VI and FLAS grants that Michigan has. And at the time when I left, we had 12 of those grants.
Does it feel different now to be a dean of an actual school? You said it's not quite the same as a school, but it feels similar and there are parallels, and certainly your experience made you incredibly qualified to take on this role. What's it like being the dean now of a school?
I have to say, it's much better.
Great. That's good. It's a sign the move was a great one.
Better. It's better in the sense that it is there are complications. I'm impressed that Notre Dame was able to start a new school. I know it wasn't easy. There are lots of turf battles and concerns about encroachment or concerns about other schools or colleges getting diminished. So it was really impressed. I was impressed that Notre Dame went ahead and did it. I wasn't trying to create a new school at Michigan, but I was trying to persuade the college that they make the International Institute into an academic unit. So make it into a bigger department so that we could hire our own faculty, so that we could offer joint degrees with the professional schools. And I think because of COVID, as well as because my first 2 years being the director of the II was during COVID, so during an austerity period where we weren't doing any new hiring. Not to mention things also like two very traumatic graduate student instructor strikes and then, just lots of other things that were very disruptive. It was just difficult to get the college to really buy into a larger vision. So when this opportunity came along, I was really happy to take it.
We're glad you took it for sure. You were talking earlier about your first experience in China as an undergraduate studying abroad. Fast forward to today, you're a leading expert in US-China relations. A lot of your research is on the Chinese labor market. You speak around the world. You have a global network. You have sat on impressive boards dealing with China and the US. We have within the Zoom room, you can't see them because there are so many of us in our respective Zoom boxes, but we have colleagues from Beijing, we have colleagues from Hong Kong, and no matter where you are in the world, China's role in the world is influencing your work, your life, your daily patterns. What are you tracking in the US-China relationship, and what should we all be looking for in how China is acting in the world right now? I think that's a really important question for universities in the US, but also just in terms of global education and all of us, no matter what country we're sitting in right now.
Yeah, I feel like we're at the most difficult time that I've ever seen in my career. Even right after the student movement in 1989, there was also, a huge downturn in U.S.-China relations. Um, we were told at the time, this was a Duke University program, that we were the only program to go ahead with a fall trip. And it seemed like that. We were in Nanjing, and it did seem like there were no other American students except for some grad students at the Hopkins Center. Um, so it is really the most difficult time period that I've ever experienced, and I'm not optimistic that it's going to get better anytime soon. I think the Trump administration will be more disruptive than the Biden administration was. And China is also not making it easier, right? China is also going through a period of more repression, more centralization, and personalization of power around Xi Jinping. So in some ways, the two leaders, although they're very different leaders in some way, they both I think tend to move us into a period where we're going to see more conflict. And honestly, I am worried that there may be actually kinetic war between US and China, but not before too long, whether it's over Taiwan or it just happens as an accident because the propensity for the the likelihood of an accident, I think, is higher when we have very unpredictable leaders. Um, so I'm really worried, and I guess what I'm worried about in terms of student engagement is that because there's so much anti-China sentiment in DC right now and huge pressure on universities to um, improve research security around STEM and things that have implications for national security, there's an inclination then to just withdraw completely from studying China and even to see people who want to study China or the Chinese language as somehow suspect and as like unpatriotic or and that's really dangerous because it should be the case that no matter what you think about China, how much you fear it or admire it, Americans need to know about China, and Americans need to have expertise on China, and not only the tension in the bilateral relationship, but also the impact of the pandemic has meant that, as you know, like the number of Americans studying China now is abysmally low. I mean, what is it now? It's 800 this year, up
Yeah,
from
it's
200
tiny.
just a tiny amount. At the same time, even in 2019, when my daughter was studying Chinese, she was going to just go for a summer, and I was fine with her only going to Taiwan. I wasn't really worried about anything in particular, but um, yeah, it's a different experience to be in China now as an American, I think.
You were talking about the student experience, and what you just said, your last comment about your daughter really anticipated what I was going to ask you, which is in terms of the numbers, our own uh, study abroad data points mirror what you're saying. Most of the students who are going to Greater China are choosing to go to Hong Kong, and that's where we have some of our strongest relationships with universities, and that's where students seem to want to go. In your mind, does it matter whether a student goes to Taiwan or to Hong Kong or to mainland China? Um, I asked that because I remember, I think the first time we met in the Liu Institute review, one of the questions you had for us was, or you asked it, should we be encouraging more students to go directly to Beijing or Shanghai or Nanjing or Shenzhen? Have you thought more about
Yeah, I
that?
mean, I think for language, if it's simply about learning the language, both Hong Kong and Taiwan, especially Taiwan, they have great programs. And in some ways, the Chinese that you learn is not it's not more diverse, but it's particularly if you're in the humanities, being in Taiwan, I think could be hugely important in terms of access to more training in classical and traditional Chinese as well as literary Chinese. But if you're interested in understanding China, the country, I think being in China is really important and having those experiences and understanding how China
Who
works as
is
a you have to be in China. And
Kevin
so I
Barnes?
worry that that's not
Huh.
going to be possible anymore. I was at a thing last month in New York where it was a bunch of people on this. It's it's funded by the Carnegie Corporation to offer advice policy to policymakers about how to maintain expertise on China in this kind of this new context we're in. Michael Zoni from Harvard was there. He's the former director of the Fairbanks Center, and he spent last year on sabbatical in China, in Fujian. He's a historian. But he said something that was really worrying to me. He said he thinks in 5 years there won't be any American students in China. He just
Mm.
doesn't see the ability to maintain these programs as possible. Um, which is that kind of shocked me. He and Robert Daly, who's at the Kissinger Institute, were both incredibly pessimistic about what's going to happen.
That is discouraging because when I think about the conversations I have with faculty here, and I'm sure you have these as well, both within Keough and outside of Keough, faculty who have been researching in China for a long time have put a pause on going to China and doing their research for fear of either how they're perceived in the US or concerns about how they'll be treated there. And that freeze in the current geopolitical climate makes sense. But the students are often more pioneering and more adventurous than professionals or faculty members. And so if that's the prediction, then we have our work cut out for us in our respective positions and all of us in the room to change that, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's not a foregone conclusion. I think a lot of it has to do with what happens at the top of the leadership of both countries. I think the next 4 years, given who Trump has put into state, Marco Rubio, who was at the front lines against the Confucius Institutes back in like 2018, Mike Waltz, National Security Advisor, and then Alex Wong, who's Deputy National Security Advisor. Everything that they've written or said about China is really worrying for higher ed. So we'll see. But China also could make changes that I think, and already I guess there's been the one good thing that's happened is that the U.S. has lifted the State Department warning from
Yeah.
3-2. So
Two.
that
Yeah.
is good, and release some prisoners and things like that. But yeah, I think we're in a rough ride for the next few years.
I think it does speak to what the provost talks about in the global strategy document, which is that on the study abroad front, we need to have intentional study abroad and think about what's the right program and curriculum and narrative for our students and for an outside public watching the movement of students to China from the US, so that students, faculty, families, everyone can see the value and the need. Because you're right, if we don't do that, the consequence is a generation of people who know nothing about China, who haven't experienced it, who don't have the linguistic capability, don't have the cultural savvy, and don't have the ability to function in a global marketplace. I mean, I think that's a good bridge probably to ask the question about something else that's in the global strategy document, which is the provost talks about being global as a skill. And I wonder what you think that means. What does it mean to be global? Oftentimes we throw around global citizen, and I think we all know, maybe we don't, but and maybe it's worth unpacking that, what a global citizen is. But when we talk about being global as a skill, when you hear that, what do you think?
So it's funny because I've said to people at the Keough School when we've been talking about our curriculum, which is that I really don't like global affairs. I'm a dean of a school of global affairs, but I find the word global, like the term global affairs, also international studies, as just a very empty vessel that we need to fill in with content. And so when we talk about global competency or being a global citizen, what I would say, and maybe this is a little bit kind of retro or traditional, but what I really would emphasize, particularly to students, is that to become a global citizen, what you really need to do is to go somewhere specifically. You need to go to a place where there is a language that is spoken in a cultural context and really try to understand that place in particular as a way, as a stepping stone to becoming somebody who can then interact with people more effectively from many different regions and cultures. So it's really putting the regional back into the global, that nobody is an expert of the globe. Like everybody has to be an expert. I'm obviously I've lived in mostly in Asia, in China and Japan. That those are the places where I feel more comfortable as an expert. But I think it still helps me when I go to other places around the world. So I hate going to countries and not trying to speak, like learn a little bit of the language because I feel like when we just use this term global, it can tend to have this emphasis of superficiality. And that's why I try to push students to, in terms like of things like study abroad, and I know this is not happening at Notre Dame, and it certainly wasn't happening at Michigan either. Most students tend to go to places where English is the common language and where it's culturally more similar to the United States. And I feel like when you're in college, really do have the opportunity to do something a little bit more outside the box, right? This is going to be one of the few times in your life where you could go pretty much anywhere. Now, these days, post-pandemic, and also with so many conflicts going on around the world, it is harder. It's harder for students now than it certainly was for me in the 1990s. I mean, post-Cold War, particularly, people were there, the world was very open to Americans, and there was a lot more interest in going to other places. I feel like post-pandemic, we've seen students really become more risk averse, and maybe parents as well.
I hear you say that, and I think it speaks to something that both the Kiev School of Global Affairs and Notre Dame Global have an obligation to do. We've been talking about students, um, but we also could just as easily be talking about faculty and encouraging them to be more global in their research and to publish more articles with international partners. We know that's something that we lag behind on. And also just the university to push it to be more global in an era when it can feel the need to retreat. I think one of my fears is that because we're fortunate to be we've been blessed with wonderful resources and a strong community of benefactors who want to give, that we can become very complacent and sort of be satisfied with where we're at, as opposed to actually going into the world and navigating a really complex, messy, ugly, untidy world, um, so that we can have a greater impact. But we have to actually challenge ourselves to do it institutionally, as a faculty, as staff, as students. And I think that's something both of our units share. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, particularly nowadays when there's so much disruption and unpredictability in the world. And universities have to consider things like risk and liability and all that. But, I'm sure up until last week, like South Korea seemed like a perfectly like safe and good place to send students. And it's like I was like, oh, a coup in South Korea was not on my bingo card last week. I mean, that was just and thankfully it was unsuccessful and seems like a very bad decision on the part of President Yoon. But yeah, there's just so many things you wake up and you're like, okay, got to deal with that today, I guess.
Right. And that's part of the creativity and the flexibility that comes with the job and the work we do. And I agree it wasn't on my bingo card either, but I'm thankful for all the ways in which we responded. Last thing, because I know we're out of time, we have 1 minute left. Um, just because of your expertise, can you give us a favorite Chinese novel and a favorite Chinese film?
Oh, well, yes. I mean, it's probably very pedestrian in some ways, but I use it to teach when I teach on Chinese politics. And it's both a novel and then it was made into a film, but it's To Live.
Okay.
And it's Yu Hua is the author. It's very I love teaching the film after I've had my students study the kind of the end of the 19th, early 20th century, all the way up to the Reform period. It follows a family from right before the Revolution to the 80s, and it's incredibly tragic and heartwarming. It's not melodramatic or sappy. I think it's a really well done movie, but it's a great way for students who have just sort of read all this material on Chinese history to sort of see how it impacts a single family as they go through the revolution, as they go through the Great Leap Forward, the Cultural Revolution, and then the Reform period. And I used to joke to my husband that when after I would teach it, because it's very tragic, even the bros in the baseball caps in the back row would be sobbing at the end of the movie. So,
We
but,
will check it out, and people will respond to you and let you know what they think of the movie. Mary, I'm really grateful for your time, given how busy your schedule is and the fact that you're zooming into us from Boston. Thank you for that. Thank you for saying yes to Notre Dame. Thank you for your leadership at the Kiev School. And it's been a pleasure to partner with you already, and I'm looking forward to seeing what our two teams can do together moving forward. So thank you for your time today.
Everybody, particularly for people who are getting up or w up in the middle of the night. I really appreciate it.
Thanks a lot. Safe travels, Mary.
Very much. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you. Okay. I really hope that gives people a window into our newest dean. She's a terrific leader. And I hope it also, as you listen to her, makes you think about the work you do, no matter where you are in the world, how it might relate to China, but also how you might think about the Keough School as a partner in working with faculty, working with students, and also to not be reticent about engaging in China, engaging in discussions about China as well. So I hope that was enjoyable. We're now going to hear a presentation from the Global Innovation team. Before I turn it over, Jonathan, I do want to take this opportunity to have a moment of celebration for the great news that was announced through the IIE Open Doors Report, which talked about our increase in study abroad participation. We went to an all-time high for us as a university at 87%. That was fabulous. Thank you. Yes, use your emoji of choice as you want to applaud that. But I want to especially thank the study abroad team here in South Bend and all of our colleagues around the world who receive students and support them. Whatever your engagement is to make a study abroad student's life different or a study abroad experience better, you're a part of that magic that is the 87%. We've put it out on social media. We've seen it on the HR public news feed. It's really wonderful to see the play it's getting, and I'm getting lots of emails from alumni and from trustees and council members and colleagues about that accomplishment. So I want to thank Hong for her leadership and everyone, Bobby as well, everyone in the study abroad team. Thank you for that. And as you heard from Mary, it's just her own study abroad experience led her to this leadership position. You're training the leaders of tomorrow and helping them be more global in their skills. For those in the global network, not in South Bend, we're actually having a celebratory lunch, pizza to enjoy one another's company and to give a shout out to all those who have been working. I hope wherever you are in the globe, you take the time to celebrate this great statistic as well. So, and be sure to tweet it out, be sure to add it to your LinkedIn profile, be sure to add it on Facebook, wherever it is that you are communicating with students and with faculty and with alumni and staff. Let's let people know about that great success. With that, I will turn it over to Jonathan. The floor is yours and the Global Innovations team.
Great. Thank you, Michael. And thank you for the very engaging, inspiring, interesting conversation with Dean Gallagher. I'd also like to endorse her recommendation on the book by Yuhua To Live and the film directed by Zhang Yimou of To Live. If you have a chance over the upcoming break, they are really terrific and important works. So my colleagues and I are delighted to have this opportunity to share with all of Notre Dame Global more about the work of our global innovation team. And we very much appreciate the collaboration and support across Notre Dame Global. Please know of our gratitude. And thank you, Maggie, for advancing the slides. The team has 5 members, including myself, Angela, Sevda, Maggie, and Geraldine. I will introduce some aspects of my own role and then introduce the overall areas of responsibility for the team as a whole. First, please know that the Global Innovation team is relatively new for Notre Dame Global and the university. We came into existence starting about 2 years ago with 3 colleagues, and the team has grown to 5 today. The Global Innovation Team was created with a key mandate to support Notre Dame Global's work, mainly with faculty, and to support the university's overall ambition to strengthen global research and scholarship. As many of you know, introducing myself now, I serve as Notre Dame Global Senior Assistant Provost for Internationalization and Global Executive Director. I am also a teaching professor. In addition to leading the Global Innovation Team's work, I serve as Michael's deputy in working closely with him, Notre Dame Global's Global Leadership Team, and the South Bend Core Area Leaders Group to advance Notre Dame Global's execution of the university's global strategy and Notre Dame Global strategic plan. The global leadership team has recently established the GLT NDG Measurable Outcome Coordinating Group, along with 4 working groups focused on 4 strategic priorities from the global strategy and linked to our strategic plan, including strengthening international partnerships, strengthening the intentionality of study abroad, strengthening international graduate student pipelines, and strengthening international undergraduate student recruitment. You received an email from me, and thanks to Reagan and the communications team, we have placed more information about the coordinating group on the Notre Dame Global portal for all to access. I also chair Notre Dame Global's 8 regional faculty advisory committees and work closely with all of the global directors on Notre Dame Global's work with these faculty committees. I thought it'd be helpful to share some of the university committees that I serve on related to the university's academic and research enterprise, including the Provost Office's Instructional Initiatives Review Committee, Notre Dame Research's Research Development Working Group, and Research Security Faculty Advisory Committee, and the Keough School's Global Policy Initiative Advisory Committee. Newly formed, the Global Innovation Team worked together to develop our team's purpose, which guides our work, as you can see on the slide. And I'll read that to all of you. You can, of course, see it on the slide. Inspire innovative and collaborative international scholarship with a view to broadening intellectual horizons and tackling global challenges in support of NDG's strategic plan goals and the university's strategic framework and global strategy. Now, a little bit about our team's responsibilities before each of the team members introduce themselves. So we have 4 key team responsibilities. We develop, implement, evaluate, and optimize a portfolio of international research support programs for faculty. Together with Notre Dame Global's global directors, innovates new research support programs in collaboration with the 8 regional faculty advisory committees and the colleges, schools, institutes, and centers. We partner with Notre Dame research, academic units, and faculty on expanding international sponsored research. We advance strategic regional and trans-regional partnership engagement initiatives, including consortia. We will now hear more from each global innovation colleague about their areas of focus. And first up is Angela DeMundo.
Thank you, Jonathan. Hi, I'm Angela DeMundo, and I'm the Senior Administrative Assistant at Notre Dame Global on Mondays through Thursdays. On Fridays, I actually work for Notre Dame Research Security, so I'm located in a different department and a different office. Here at NDG, besides supporting Jonathan, his calendar, and all his daily endeavors, I also support the off-campus locations behind the scenes. I'm the point person for the faculty advisory committees for each of the locations. This includes arranging all meetings across campus and the various time zones with faculty and staff, sending out communications, preparing the minutes and the briefings for each location. Lately, we've been working on the updates to each of the committees. As some of you know, The planning for these updates has taken almost a year to complete through meetings with the various directors and then separately with the associate deans of all the colleges and schools. As the new committees were finalized, the letters for the turnover of the committees were sent, and I keep track of the responses and create the new rosters, which are published in our portal. All of the planning keeps me busy, so I really appreciate those of you who reply promptly to my emails and requests, as you make my day so much easier and more productive. If I had a tendency towards having favorites, you would be them. In addition, I also support the Global Innovation Team by managing our budget. I support Geraldine Meehan by assisting her with her grant applications and review meetings, as well as the finance side of the grants she administers. And next, we'll hear from Sevda.
Thank you, Angela. And again, hi, my name is Sevda Arslan, and I'm the Program Director for Faculty Support and Partnerships. I'm the newest member of the team as of April this year, and I've been enjoying everything, especially learning from everyone. And I appreciate Jonathan's guidance and mentorship through this process. I also look forward to meeting more of you and to work with you to support the growth of research and scholarly activities. My position entails primarily working with faculty to increase their external funding and research output. I've been working closely with some of our global directors on funding opportunities such as Thais and Maria Mercedes. Last month, as you might have heard, we won our very first grant that I have been working with Thais and some other colleagues. I also hope that you had the chance to look at our initial list for the external funding opportunities. I will put it on the chat shortly. I appreciated the feedback that a lot of the global directors provided, and this list will be periodically updated. So please, as some of you have done, reach out to me if you know of any other funding opportunities that we should be aware of. Essentially, I would like to emphasize that if you know of any faculty members who are looking for external grants, feel free to connect them with me. And lastly, my job entails managing effective stewardship reporting for the division. I truly enjoyed in the spring working with 18 or so of my colleagues who wrote excellent impact statements, and we have that report on a portal. I will share the link with you as well. This is from me for now, and I'm turning it over to Maggie. Thank you.
Unmute myself. All right. Hello, everybody. Thanks, Sevda. My name is Maggie. I'm the Director of Academic Strategy and Partnership. My role really has three main areas of focus: supporting academic partnerships, global networks and conferences, and some Global South initiatives. In terms of what that looks like in my day-to-day activities, I'll start with the academic partnerships. There are a lot of types of agreements that exist for partners that Hong's team will know very well: the study abroad agreements, faculty exchange agreements. I specifically work on university-wide MOUs. So this will mean receiving inquiries for new MOUs, reviewing ongoing activity, or when the MOU is expired or coming up to completion, I will coordinate stewarding the re-signing of that MOU. For supporting global networks and conferences, this really is a platform to help bring faculty together to connect and share their research. I focus on building more of the content for the programming, not necessarily the logistical support. Some of the networks that I support are the Consortium of Catholic Universities. Father Bob, when he was in Notre Dame's Global's office, started this in 2022, and it's a consortia of 10 Catholic universities around the world. Shout out to our Rome colleagues for hosting a conference this summer with the consortium. I also work with the Pamoja Network, which is for Sub-Saharan Africa. A couple years ago, we hosted the first conference with our colleagues and partners at Strathmore University, and we have several initiatives that Jackie and myself are stewarding through its existence. Events that I'm currently working on that may not have a global network per se. I'm the university's designated point of contact for the UN's climate conference called the COP. It was in Azerbaijan this year, but I look forward to working with Thais as it'll be in Brazil next year. And then I also am working with several people here on campus about a global partnerships conference where we hope to bring partners from around the world to campus in September of 2025. Finally, I do have a specific focus on supporting Global South engagement activities. The Pamoja Network is really one of those vehicles. We welcomed our first African students to the iShare program last summer, and we're kicking off the recruitment for the next year. We have some visiting guest scholar grants. We have a Uganda Fulbright visiting scholar. There's lots going on in that area. And then we also just completed the second iteration of the International Education Administrators Program, which is in partnership with the India Fulbright Commission and the U.S. India Education Foundation. So a lot keeps me busy, but I really want to emphasize that none of this is something I can do on my own. It's all in collaboration and cooperation with you great colleagues around the world. So I'm really excited. One of my favorite parts is working in that global space. So thank you all so much for working together in all these different ways. That's it for me, but I'm going to turn it over to Geraldine.
Thank you. Thank you, Maggie. And good morning, afternoon, good evening to everybody. It's lovely to be here with you. I am Geraldine Meehan, Senior Director of Faculty Engagement and Global Research, and I have worked with faculty from NDG for about 7 years and would have been with the Global Innovation Team since it was formed. I know many of you, but I'm also aware that I have not met many of you as well. So hopefully over the next while, that will be something that can happen as you come to campus. My work generally centers on, although not exclusively on faculty, I work on expanding and supporting research at NDG, mainly through NDG's constantly evolving and expanding grant programs. For those of you who may be new to NDG, it's important to mention that the focus is always on collaboration, and that's collaboration between Notre Dame research and faculty and international researchers. So we always at our institution, or not at our unit, NDG, emphasize the collaboration aspect. With the input from many others, I designed the call for proposals, the applications, manage the review procedures, the entire process up until the reporting of outcomes. Some of the grant programs, and maybe increasingly many of the grant programs, will be joint programs with other institutions, which, as you can understand, always complicates the situation, but essentially in a good way, as it bridges as it begins a deeper collaboration and enhances a cultural understanding and exchange that would not otherwise be experienced if we were just doing it on our own, with our own faculty on our own campus. The encouragement and support of research can take the shape of supporting faculty in many different ways and support research in many different ways. It can be faculty to faculty research. It can be conferences. Increasingly for us, it's supporting visiting guest scholars from abroad. And recently, working with people like Daraj and other units on campus, it has taken the form of supporting ND graduate students and international faculty advisors of international undergraduate students. Now, this year's grant programs are listed on the slide, and trust me, I'm not going to go through all of those with you. Many of you may already be familiar with them, but I'd like to bring your attention to 4. The Global Network Development Grant Program was essentially a nexus of 7 grants over 7 of our international locations. And we are just in the review process for those 7 grant programs. But it has been truly a very interesting and enjoyable experience working over all our locations and seeing what kind of opportunities people are interested in exploring at those locations and working with all the directors around that. We've always, with other parts of our unit, and I'm going to mention Rome here, they've already been very involved with working with graduate students and postdocs and that, and London has been too, but we've always really wanted to work more with the graduate school. And so through our Global Dissertation Grant Program this year, we here increased our engagement with graduate students and worked with other units on campus. we really wanted to support some of the initiatives like the Catholic Consortium and Sub-Saharan Africa. I'd say I was a little disappointed that the applications didn't achieve the depth in those two areas that we might have liked, but I think it was a very good start, and it was overall has ended up being a really nice start and to a deepening of those collaborations here on campus. And so hopefully we'll be able to move forward with that in the future. Another one I'd like to bring your attention to is the Notre Dame Ukrainian Catholic University. As you know, President John Jenkins had invested a lot of money in supporting Ukraine at the time of the war. And this time round, NDR is fully on board with us, NDG, with supporting that collaboration. We're going to move forward with a second grant program supporting faculty research, and NDR is putting forward all the money, which actually amounts to $500,000 to support that research, and we're going to be launching that in January. So we're actually really excited to be able to, again, support Ukrainian Catholic University. And we're also really pleased to have a unit on campus so supportive and one that's so important to us, NDR, and that initiative. And finally, we've launched the Guest Scholars Program for Asia and Sub-Saharan Africa. It felt a little bit, we want to bring guest artists or scholars from those areas of the world. And for a while, it felt like we were pulling teeth a little bit, but it seems like we have a very good group of applications that have come in for both areas, and we really want to internationalize the campus as well. So we're looking forward to being able to support faculty and artists in bringing those guests to our campus over the next year. And finally, well, I shouldn't say finally, because it's a big part of my job. I annually report on the outcome of research and conferences, both at the global locations and including our research grant portfolio. And for those of you who are interested, you can look at the reports for the last 2 years on the portal, and Diane has even offered to put the ones for the previous years there as well. I also serve as a Fulbright liaison, faculty liaison for the university, which can take many forms, generally involves interaction with faculty, to do with very specific practicalities around their applications to be Fulbright scholars. I know last year Maria Mercedes was incredibly helpful with helping one of those faculty members prepare for their interview for his application to Mexico. And moving on beyond myself now, just to go back to the team, if you look at the next slide, you will basically see an overview of what we've been saying here and of the team itself and our general responsibilities. Jonathan suggested, and I think it was a very good idea, to put the presentation on the portal, because it could be part of onboarding for new people in the past if they just wanted to know part of what we do. Realize there's no time for questions now, but any of us, should you have questions, feel free to get in touch, and we'd be more than happy to get the opportunity to know you better, as well as for you to get to know us better and what we do. Thank you. Now over to Michael. Back to you, Michael.
Thank you very much, Geraldine, and thank you everyone from the Global Innovation Team for your remarks and for sharing your work with us. As we've talked about previously, the town hall is an opportunity for us to learn from one another about our work and to see how we can connect up with one another. In the final minutes that we have together, I wanted to end by talking about something I've been thinking a lot about lately, and it comes out of today's presentation and also the great work that's going on all around the global network. One of the things that has struck me about what our colleagues from the Global Innovation Team have shared is that they are working with faculty and with colleagues in the global network to bring faculty's dreams to life and to advance, as Mary and I were talking about earlier in our conversation, aspirations that we have individually and collectively as a community to be more global. And I'm grateful for that. And I'm grateful for the work and the attention to detail that the Global Innovation Team manifests in its work, and that we all do whatever our portfolio of responsibilities. When I think about what innovation requires, I think that one of the things that is most important is something we don't talk about very much, and that's fearlessness. I had the opportunity and the privilege last week to hear Gabby, our own Gabby, from Jerusalem, come and speak on a panel as part of the What Do We Owe One Another series that Father Bob has sponsored as his signature series for the beginning of the year. And Gabby's voice was one of 5 panelists talking about voices from the ground in Israel and Palestine. And what impressed me about Gabby's remarks, if you had the opportunity to hear him, you know this, he spoke very personally and intimately about his own experience of working at Tantor and of being a member of the Notre Dame community during October 7th and the aftermath of that, and leading him into service in a tank. I thought at the time, and I told him this afterwards when we shared a meal together, that his ability to be fearless about sharing that personal experience, and also fearless in admitting that he didn't have answers, he only had questions, was a really model for all of us. It takes a tremendous amount of courage and intellect to be able to say we don't have answers, but we have questions and we're seekers. And when I look at what we've accomplished in the past several months here at NDG, what I see is a group of people who are seeking and who are striving and are succeeding in serving students, serving faculty, serving the University of Notre Dame, and doing so with a fearlessness, right? Whether it's Lisa at Kyle Moore working with Harper Cancer Institute to get them registered and designated in a new way to bring greater healthcare in Ireland and to advance cancer research, whether it's Emer in Dublin working to bring Amitav Ghosh, a world-renowned author, to talk to our students and to show Notre Dame as a center place for celebrating the arts and talking about arts and politics and complicated issues of immigration and identity and race and multiculturalism and nationalism, whether it's the work of Esteban and Santiago working to create a dual degree umbrella with La Católica, one of our biggest and most important partners. Whether it's our colleagues in Beijing and Hong Kong working together, along with colleagues in Notre Dame to run the Greater China Scholars Program and bring that back into in-person, Jingyu and Hong and Miranda and Catherine are all working to bring that together and bring Chinese students to learn about Notre Dame for the first time in person to try and yield more Chinese students to come here. All of that work, from what I started with Jerusalem around the world to Beijing, requires fearlessness. And I am in awe of our team and humbled by the way in which we put ourselves out there, put the students and the faculty we serve out there, and we come to our work with a sense of creativity and a can-do attitude. And we know that by being in fellowship with one another, being in partnership and collaboration, and being fearless in imagining the projects, yes, Sebda says, I can apply for that and we can win that. And she does. And Thais says, yes, I can partner with you and we can win that. And we do. That requires a fearlessness. We are not a complacent division, and I am super proud of that. So no matter what's going on in your sector of the world, which we know when we read the headlines can be a challenging and dark and complicated place right now, please remember and hold on to the fact that you individually, as a member of the Notre Dame family, are courageous and you are fearless. And that's a wonderful thing. Don't underestimate your creativity. Don't underestimate your ability to be a wonderful partner. Don't underestimate your potential to imagine a brighter future. And certainly don't underestimate yourself to believe that you can't make that brighter future for Notre Dame and for the students and faculty you serve and for one another. We owe ourselves, to quote Father Bob, we should be asking ourselves, what do we owe one another? We owe one another kindness. We owe one another fellowship. We owe one another fearlessness. And we owe one another the ability to walk on this mission and this vision that we're on together. With that, I hope everyone has a wonderful, wonderful holiday season, no matter what you're celebrating, Christmas, Hanukkah, the New Year, Kwanzaa, you're still thinking back to Thanksgiving or Diwali, whatever it is that you're celebrating, please take this time to be festive with family and friends. I am grateful for all you do for Notre Dame, and let's continue to not be fearless together. Okay? Be well, everyone.